What's going on, guys? I've done episodes in the past, best for X, and X could be a number of things. Today we're going to talk about less common calibers that might be great for certain applications. And by less common, I mean not the standard 9mm, 308, 223, and I'm big on those calibers. And you know that I'm a big fan of some of those calibers for a lot of reasons and for the standard choices. But when might something else be the best fit? More uncommon calibers. So if you're interested in less common calibers, or you just want to learn about some more obscure calibers and what they might be really good at, that's what we're going to talk about today on Gunfighter Life. I'm going to forego the bio today, mostly because I just don't feel like putting it in. If you haven't heard it before, this is your very first time listening. First and foremost, I am a Christian. God is number one in my life, and everything that I do, this podcast is no different. I've been a professional gunfighter most of my adult life and hunted since I was a boy. With that, God has blessed me to do a lot of things in life, and I try and pass that experience and knowledge on to you guys. With that, let's get into it. If I were going to have one Western mountain rifle chambering, what would be the best? And it wouldn't be a lot of your standards. It wouldn't be 308. It wouldn't be 300 Win Mag. It wouldn't be 270. It would be something a little bit more obscure, but a great round. If I had to pick one kind of westerns, plains, high plains, excluding Canada and Alaska, because in the lower 48 as of now there is no grizzly bear season, I would choose a 280 Ackley improved. The 280 was a great round. It might be known as the 7mm Remington Express, but the 280 Ackley improved is an improved version of it. Now there are many different versions of Ackley. Ackley did the Ackley thing on a lot of different cartridges, but he basically made them more efficient. You see the 30-06, which has a lot of wildcats, the 280 being one of them, or mainstream modifications. That's meant to feed military guns, like machine guns and things like that. So it needs a bit of a taper. If you get rid of some of that taper, change the shoulder angle, things like that, you can get more powder in there, a little bit better optimized for like a bolt action hunting rifle. Ackley did that to a lot of chambers, but perhaps none that became more prolific than the 280 Ackley improved. In fact, it's the only Ackley improved that I'm aware of that you can commonly find ammo on the shelf, and I believe the 280 Ackley improved is probably as or more common than the actual 280. 280 Ackley improved is not just a custom hand loader's proposition anymore. There are good factory loads for the 280 AI. The 280 AI is a beautiful balance. It's not far behind the 7mm Rem Mag, and it does so with far less powder. It does so with less ejecta-mass, which means less recoil. It's far more efficient than 7mm Rem Mag. That said, it has a major drawback of it does not have the ammo availability of a 7mm Rem Mag. Just off the shelf, it does not have that same ammo availability, but it's a fantastic round. You know, great for elk, great for black bear, mule deer, whitetail deer, pronghorn. It's a fantastic round. It's fantastic. And I know the 270, and the 270 is a good round. This episode is not to put down other rounds, but if you look at it from an all-around perspective, that 7mm, it's a more versatile bullet, especially if you hand load, but even if you don't, there's a lot of really good chamberings. Unless you get a custom barrel with a custom twist and stuff like that, your 270 is going to top out 150 grain bullets. You might get some heavier, but common bullets is 130 to 150 grain. 7mm, you can go way down and way up. It's just really versatile. It's a really good cartridge, and there's nothing wrong with 30-06, but again, this is not about the mainstream cartridges. And if I'm being honest, as much as I like the 30-06, for most things, I think the 280 is a better balance. And for a Western mountain rifle, one of the main things I look at, it's not accuracy. It's not what cool Gucci camouflage pattern is hot this year that the gun comes in. It's not, does it have a muzzle brake on it? It's mostly weight. When I'm hiking around, going on real long hunts in really treacherous, nasty terrain in the backcountry, weight is a big concern. And if I'm shooting a lightweight, handy mountain rifle, I don't want a big bruiser cartridge. I don't want a 300 Win Mag in a mountain rifle. I also like to train and shoot with my rifles, standing, kneeling, things like that in common positions, not just off a bench for 3 rounds and then go out and hunt with it. If you're going to shoot quite a bit and carry the gun quite a bit, a light, handy rifle that's not crazy punishing in recoil is the name of the game for me. And for that, the 280 Ackley Improved is a phenomenal choice. Something like a Kimber Hunter or a Kimber Mountain Ascent in 280 Ackley Improved. That's one of the reasons it's chambered in 280 Ackley Improved. It's a phenomenal pairing. Control round feed, bolt action, stainless steel, many of the things that I like, minus it doesn't have iron sights if I break the scope. If I smash an optic or something like that, I wish it did have backup iron sights, but that said, phenomenal choice. 280 Ackley Improved is a phenomenal caliber for an all-around Western mountain cartridge. Now, it is no secret that a big chunk of the time, if you're looking for a defensive handgun, 9mm. 9mm is the de facto defensive handgun caliber of our time, period. You can like that or not, but it is. It is the de facto. It is far more common than any other caliber by a wide margin for defensive handguns. It is the de facto defensive handgun caliber of our time, and I like 9mm, but that's not the spirit of this episode. What would be a reason you would choose something else? Why would one choose something so off the reservation, so crazy as 5.7? Well, I'll tell you why. What if you're a backpacker? What if you're backpacking something like the Arizona Trail and you're, somewhere near the border and you want to, I would say maybe don't do that or go with a group, but if you want to do that, if you want to hike, you should be able to hike in this country where you want to. And I do quite a bit of hiking and rucking. And with that said, I like to have a gun on me. And now I usually have a gun on me, but if you're going to carry one as a backpacker for long distances, unless you're going to carry the gun and the ammo with you, and you want a decent amount of rounds, the 5.7 might make a lot of sense. Something like the FN 5.7 handgun with, 100 rounds of 9mm for a backpacker. That's a lot of literal lead that you're just carrying around on the off chance you may need it. Now, you may decide it's worth it, but 100 rounds of 5.7 weighs a lot less. If your main thing that you're concerned about is not bear, it's not things like that, not that you couldn't use it for animal defense, but it wouldn't be my first, second, or 10th choice for that. But if you're backpacking long distance on foot and your main thing you're concerned about is people behaving badly, right? There's a whole podcast called Park Predators. If you were doing something like that, backpacking, mountain biking, where all you have are those little kind of pockets and you're wearing the stretchy shorts. Hey, I'm not here to judge, just not this episode. But if all you have is one of those shirts with little pockets on it, and that's where you're going to carry your gun and ammo, a couple of water bottles, and you're going, 50, 60 miles that day, a 5.7 might make a lot of sense for that. You might say 22, and 22 would be a good choice for this too, but I think 5.7, I wouldn't say you were wrong for picking 22 long rifle, but again, for this oddball caliber, this may be a good choice. It's going to be, if you get good ammo, should be more reliable than even reliable rimfire. Rimfire suffers from a couple of different issues. And it's good centerfire ammo. It's not cheap, but that's not the point of this. It's a lightweight, reliable, if you get a good one, not if you get the dirt cheapest one you can find, which I don't really recommend for much of anything. But if you get a good 5.7 handgun and a good 5.7 ammo, right, it's lightweight. It's got a really high power to weight ratio. It makes a lot of sense here, as opposed to something like a 22 mag, which has some feeding issues because it's long and skinny. It has a rim. It's rim fire, so the ignition may not be as reliable as it's almost certainly not as reliable as a center fire. So for this, 5.7 makes a lot of sense. You're going on a long mountain bike trip. You want a decent, not great, but a decent defensive option where the ammo doesn't weigh a whole lot. It's a good choice for this. Again, I'm not saying that you should carry 5.7 as your day-to-day. I'm not saying that it's better than 9mm. I'm saying for this specific application, it makes some sense. With all the new state-of-the-art 100 feet per second faster than last year's round, new rounds that come out all the time. 224 Valkyrie, 6 ARC, 22 ARC, 22 Creedmoor, all these just hot rounds. Why? And with all the tactical rounds coming out, the 30 Super Carry and the 277 Fury, why would anybody choose a 35 Remington? Because it's a great cartridge. 35 Remington is awesome. It's an awesome kind of Northeast, the Black Bear cartridge. Again, the standard's kind of 30-30, but that's not in keeping with today's episode. Generally, you can fire a heavier bullet in factory ammo, larger frontal diameter, and it just has a reputation for being a good Black Bear slayer, and I think it's a good deserved reputation. And we covered this a little bit, but I'm going to rehash it because I don't think that everybody that listens hangs on every word that I say and listens to every episode. I did one, guns for people in blue states, or guns for people that aren't or don't want to be perceived as tactical people. I've got no problem being perceived as a tactical person, but I don't generally just dress super tactical. I'm wearing duck camo and canvas pants right now, which in northern Idaho is about as close to fitting in as you're probably going to get, right? Old school camo and working pants, that's about as North Idaho as you're probably going to get. But also underneath my jacket, I'm rocking an M17 with a Trijicon RMR and a spare magazine and a nice fixed blade knife and a tourniquet. But you would know that if I was walking into the hardware store across the street. Anyway, some people don't want to be perceived as that tactical, right? They don't want ballistic nylon as part of their wardrobe. They don't want, maybe they have family members or something that are okay with certain kinds of guns, and I don't understand this I do understand that it's hoplophobia, but I don't understand, but I've seen it enough to know that it's true. Some people are really turned off by some guns, but not others. Like if you share a family vehicle, it may be okay for you to have a lever action gun in there, but not okay for you to have an AK-47 in there. Even if they're both legal, even all that stuff. Or maybe they're not legal. Maybe you live in a place where an AK-47 has been infringed so much that you can't have it because it shall not be infringed has in fact been quite infringed where you live. 35 Remington is a good round. It's a good, decent round. It's an intermediate cartridge. We might not think of it that way. Maybe we might not think of it as tactical as a 7.62x39. But look at the ballistics on a 35 Remington. It's impressive. Now, if you're trying to go super long range, it's not great. But if you just want to mount that with its iron sights or, the old classic mounts where you can still use the iron sights and use a more modern optic, a fixed 4 and LPVO, and have that as an all-around truck gun, 35 Remington, I believe that was used by law enforcement back in the day. And again, there may be better options, but maybe you can't have them because you live in an infringed state and you decide that you want to stay in that infringing state. And 35 Remington's a good round. If you wanted just a good truck gun and you're mostly going to deal with, putting down deer on the side of the road that get injured, or you hunt black bear and deer, that's the biggest thing in your area, but you also want a decent truck gun and you can't have a semi-automatic, 35 Remington's a good round that it's not often thought of. I think it's mostly forgotten. There's a few little pockets, especially in the Northeast and in the Yankee hunting country. That's not an oxymoron. There are Yankees that hunt. I know. I feel for you guys. But outside those circles, 35 Remington is really not known. But if you see a good deal on a good, and the most common, this came in a lot of guns, but the most common one in the last several decades has been the Marlin 336. If you see a Marlin 336 and 35 Remington, they still make ammo for it. It's still a great cartridge. If you wanted a good all-around truck gun that wasn't a semi-auto, that wasn't a shotgun, that wasn't going to turn people off that you had in your car that weren't really gun people, like where you live culturally, it would be fine if they saw an old Woodstock lever action in the back of your car, but you also wanted a long gun back there for protection and for hunting. 35 Remington's a good choice. It's a kind of a good forgotten caliber. Many a big-bodied Northeast whitetail and black bear have gone to the dust with 35 Remington. It's a good round. I do believe, ironically, it was initially chambered in a semi-auto, the Remington Model 8, but it's mostly seen, the most common gun that I think was chambered in was the Marlin 336. It's a good gun. It's a good round. Don't discount it. Now, with 22 long rifle being so cheap and 22 Magnum being more available and 223 being both cheap and much more powerful, why would anybody choose the old, seemingly antiquated 22 Hornet? It lives in this no man's land between the 22 Magnum and the 223. There are a couple other obscure cartridges in there, like a 218B and a 222, but why in this no man's land? Why would you? And often you wouldn't, right? Often you would just step up. There's a reason I even got rid of my 22 Magnum, because I could very cheaply reload 223 and get brass and all that stuff. And anyway, why would anybody make the case that the 22 Hornet is a good round for anything? Well, because it is a pretty big no man's land, for one. You may not want the power of a 223. You may be hunting varmints in an area where it's totally legal to hunt varmints, but 223 is going to be a lot louder, and you just don't want to be a pain in the butt to your neighbors. You want to be a good neighbor. You think realistically, a 20-something inch barrel 22 Hornet will not be anywhere near as loud and this disturbing to your neighbors, where a 223 would be quite loud and disturbing to your neighbors. There's one. Number two would be, you want to get into reloading. Now, if you want to get into reloading, I suggest you start with 38 Special 357 Magnum. But that's, in my experience, the most gentle, easier, lowest barrier to entry for a reloader, straight wall cartridge, all that stuff. But if you're only interested in reloading for a rifle, the 22 Hornet makes a lot of sense. One, it's small. Two, it doesn't take a lot of powder, but all the other components are simple and easy and affordable, right? It's pretty expensive to buy 22 Hornet ammo, but if you're going to reload, which you can technically reload for 22 long rifle, you can technically reload a rimfire. It's just a way more complicated, maybe not complicated, it's way less common a process than reloading a centerfire. But all the other stuff for 22 Hornet is pretty common. 22 caliber projectiles, .224 diameter projectiles, common. It takes common primers, right? So, and it takes a little bit of powder. And you can do some pretty cool stuff with it, right? You can reload all kinds of different bullet weights. Now, you can't get too crazy because a lot of those are going to have not as fast a twist rate to stabilize some of the heavier bullets, but it's got a lot more flexibility than you might give it credit for on the surface if you looked at all the different loads available for 22 Hornet. So if you wanted a kind of DIY reloading, really fun cartridge without a lot of recoil, 22 Hornet. Also, it's kind of an advanced reloader's cartridge too, so it kind of lives in this really fun for reloaders area. It's good for beginners. Once you get more advanced, you can do some more custom loads, like you can load it down and make it real quiet. And these traditionally would be in like a bolt gun, so you could load a subsonic. Now, if you blow yourself up, this is your fault. You can't just say take a given load and cut the powder in half. That's not how that works. But if you know what you're doing and you know to stay within published data and stuff like that, you can load down this cartridge and get like a subsonic round. a real quiet round. So it's a pretty cool, again, lives in that no man's land kind of varmint round. There's maybe not an opposite end of the spectrum, but what's far different, like going to a completely different direction from the 22 Hornet, would be the 454 Casull. Now, there are more powerful handgun cartridges now for sure. You said, why wouldn't you just get a 460? Then you can shoot 454 Casull in it. Because every 460 I've ever, like that X frame size gun, is so big as to be ridiculous, comical, and a handgun in name only. Like, they can't generally... You're probably not going to, let's say, use, carry, shoot them in a traditional handgun manner. The 454 Casull is kind of the limit for me as far as the handguns are big. Like, a Super Red Hawk is big, but it's not comically big. The X frames, like the 500 Smith & Wessons, the 460s, those are comically big to me. A Super Red Hawk's not comically big to me. It's a big handgun, but not so big as to be impractical. Also, you can shoot 45 long Colt in it. Probably you could shoot 45 auto rim in it. I don't know, that's a lot of free bore, but I mean, it probably would work. Check on that before you do it. But it's real flexible. If you reload, a real good cartridge, but even if you don't, there's a lot of 454 Casull loads out there. There's a lot of 45 long Colts out there. It's common .452 diameter bullet. If you, right, I'm not recommending you carry this for a carry gun. I'm not recommending anything like that. But if you just want a big bore revolver, like a big bore revolver to have, and you might hunt with it, you might just have it in the truck as a big revolver in the truck because you want that to be your truck gun or whatever. You don't have the space, you don't feel safe with a long gun, but you want a heavy hitter. 454 Casull is a good one, and I think a lot of times it is overshadowed now because people are like, oh, but there's the 460. Why would I get the 454 Casull? Again, because they're in kind of comically big guns. The 454 Casull, not so much. It's what I would consider a still practical sized gun. Right, like a handgun you could carry on your hip, not one you'd pretty much have to carry slung across your chest like a rifle, which in that case, why don't you just carry a rifle? I see those big X-frames as more of a novelty than a useful handgun. I see the 454 Casull about as big as I'd want to go. You may disagree, but as big as I'd want to go for a useful handgun. Now, if you just want a handgun hunt and hunt out of a deer stand with a handgun, the size of the handgun doesn't really matter. Throw it on a bipod if you want. I'm talking about like walking, hiking, that kind of hunting with a handgun. Again, and the 454 Casull is big and heavy enough to kill anything on the planet. And if you just want a big bore revolver, just because you want to shoot a big bore revolver, 454 Casull is a big, spicy revolver cartridge. But again, you can also shoot 45 long Colt in it. And with it being a bigger framed handgun with mild, like cowboy action 45 long Colts, it won't be harsh to shoot. So, there you go. 454 Casull. And again, if you hand load stuff is common, those kind of cartridges are real expensive. When you get into the more obscure cartridges, they can be really expensive to buy as a factory load, even like 22 Hornet, 454 Casull. But if you hand load, they're not that expensive. Once you have the brass, right, it's going to cost you a little bit more in powder, well, quite a bit more in powder, but powder's not the main cost of the reload procedure versus like a 45 ACP, but the projectile's the same. Primers, there's not a giant change in price difference there, just it's going to take more powder. You get the idea. It's much more affordable if you want to reload it, and it's a straight wall cartridge. It's a big one, but not tough to reload if you know what you're doing. The 454 Casull, I think it's kind of at that upper end again of practical, useful big bore revolvers, and I think it's often overlooked. So if you want a big bore revolver that you could carry, I'm not recommending for an EDC, but like a backcountry carry or a truck gun that you might have to throw on and hike with, and you just want to shoot a big bore revolver, 454 Casull is a cool cartridge. Common bullet diameter. Again, 45 long Colt is common, and spicy 45 long Colts are plenty powerful enough too. So there's a wide swath of stuff you can shoot through it. It's a cool cartridge. Now, two real common gauges. You know I gotta go shotgun here, because you know how much I like the shotgun as a practical tool. The two most common, by far the most common, is the 12 gauge, and right behind that, the 20 gauge. Both are pretty common. There is a gauge in the middle. There is a factory available option in the middle of the 12 gauge and the 20 gauge. You probably know about the 16 gauge. You've probably heard about the 16 gauge. It kind of lost the race. It's very obscure today. It wasn't so obscure long ago. Long ago, it was a fairly popular gauge, which means a lot of shotguns were made in it, and a lot of really affordable shotguns were made in it. And since it's not popular now, a lot of those decent shotguns that are in 16 gauge can be had sometimes at really good deals. Whereas if it was a 12 gauge or a 20 gauge, it might demand a little bit more money. But since it's a 16 gauge, it'll be quite a bit more affordable. I saw a really affordable one of those adjustable choke, screw adjustable choke, Mossberg bolt actions, which I like as a practical shotgun anyway, in 16 gauge recently in a gun store. Why would you possibly choose that? Because again, 16 gauge is a good practical gauge. It's a good in-between. It's not as readily available, but let's say you have a hunting cabin somewhere, or let's say you have a bug out location somewhere, and you want a good practical hunt pretty much anything in North America option that's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. You're not going to care if it gets a little bit of rust on it. If somebody breaks in and steals it, that's on them, but you're not going to cry yourself to sleep at night sucking your thumb thinking about the Daniel Defense Mark 18 that got taken. Right? A bolt action 16 gauge shotgun. The ammunition is not as readily available, but if you plan ahead, you can get 16 gauge slugs, you can get 16 gauge buckshot, you can get 16 gauge birdshot of all different types. You could have a variety of that stashed for not a lot of money in a cheap, affordable, and really good utilitarian shotgun. And I'm not saying you have to get a bolt action. I'm just saying sometimes they can be had for really, really easy money. Right? You might find a guy at a gun show that's really willing to work a deal on like a Winchester pump action, really good shotgun in 16 gauge, where he wouldn't really budge on a 12 gauge or a 20 gauge. But the 16 gauge, like nobody wants a 16 gauge anymore. This one's not a collector's piece. There are people that collect like some of the more obscure guns, but like this one's not a collector. It's been hunted with. The receiver's all worn where somebody carried it through the field. It's had some rust on it. It's been steel wooled off and re-blued. It's not a collector piece, but it's still a good shooter. And it's in 16 gauge, and it's a good utilitarian pump action shotgun. Again, you might be able to negotiate a decent price on that. And as we discussed, if you want a secondary gun or a loaner gun to hand somebody that's not expensive, or somebody's legally allowed to have a gun and they don't, and they get into a sticky situation, they're like, I would like to have a gun, and you're like, here you go, 16 gauge, box of buckshot, don't hurt yourself. Or again, you want to store it at a hunting cabin. If the off chance happens that you can make it there, but you for some reason don't have any of your stuff with you by the time you make it there, you get jacked up along the way. Police are confiscating guns like they did in Katrina when they stop your vehicle and they search all your vehicles, and it's either you give up your guns or you get hauled away to prison and something really bad's happening and there's going to be nobody there to take care of your family. At least when you get to the cabin, if you decide to do that, you'll have a gun there. So again, it's a good gauge, and it may be a really good choice for kind of a budget shotgun option. And again, ballistically, it's right in between pretty much a 12 gauge and a 20 gauge. It's a really sweet, really good gauge that, again, kind of fell by the wayside because both 20 gauge and 12 gauge are both so popular, but that doesn't make ballistically a 16 gauge a bad choice. In fact, I wish it were more popular because a lot of people might want a little bit less recoil than the 12, but not step all the way down to a 20. It's a good gauge. So a good utilitarian, cheap, affordable 16 gauge shotgun for a backup, for stashing somewhere that's safe and responsible. You get one of those old bolt action shotguns. The bolts easily come out. You can stash a shotgun one place and the bolt another, where the odds of somebody finding both and putting them together if they steal the shotgun are almost none. you get the idea. A good, affordable, but still really good hunting tool, right? Talk about utilitarian. A pump action or bolt action 16 gauge shotgun, super utilitarian. So I hope you liked this episode of like best obscure caliber for X situation, because a lot of these more obscure calibers are really good. And just because I like the standards, I like 9mm, I like 223, I like 308, they are my go-to standards as well. There may be times where you want something else, and you may just be wondering, what are all these calibers and what are they good for? Well, hopefully today was an eye-opener as to what some of these other calibers are and what they might be useful for. Hope you enjoyed it. I've been doing a lot of deep philosophical episodes. That's what you guys said that you wanted, at least the patrons, and they really do a lot to support the show. But hopefully this was a fun little aside on just fun obscure calibers and what they might be good for in real practical terms, not just as a collector. But there's nothing wrong with that. But more obscure calibers you could actually use, and they'd be good at something. So with that, I hope you really enjoyed today's episode. If you enjoyed it, if you're a regular listener, you got anything out of this episode and you want to support, contribute, consider becoming a patron. Also, patrons get a lot of really cool insider-only content, posts, more tactical tips, insider-only episodes that only they get. Like, only patrons get some of those episodes, and you're just not going to hear them unless you're either a really good hacker and you've got nothing better to do than to hack into my Patreon page, which seems like you would, because it's like $5. Just pay the $5. Probably not worth the time to hack into it. Or you could actually become a patron and get that insider-only content. So I guess get it either way, but I'd go the easy route if I were you. Anyway, consider becoming a patron. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. With that, your tactical tip of the day. If you're a regular listener, and I've mentioned this before, but it's been a while, right? It's been a while. I'm a big fan of carrying a fixed blade as opposed to a folding pocket knife. I know most people carrying a folding knife, but I am a big fan of carrying a fixed blade. If you're like, I want to carry a fixed blade, but I just want to put it in my pocket, that's today's tactical tip. It's called an Ulti-Clip, and that's like the brand name is like Jello. There are probably other brands, but the Ulti-Clip, look it up. You can attach it to a lot of sheaths that have a hole in there, and it lets the sheath slip into your pocket, and you clip it on, and then when you grab the knife, the sheath stays in your pocket. So, see where I'm going with that, right? You get a decent-sized fixed blade knife that goes in your pocket, that clips in, it's secure. If you do it right, you can even kind of fold the hem of your pants so that where the seam is overlaps the knife and you can barely see it. It's probably not much more visible than the big clip on a folding pocket knife. And you got a good fixed blade option. And again, it's an Ulti-Clip. They're not that expensive. If you're looking to carry a fixed blade knife, you don't want to carry it on your belt. There's nothing wrong with that, but a lot of people don't, especially if you're going to wear a t-shirt or something. You want to carry it in your pocket. That is my tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. This is from John the Baptist, early in the Gospel of Matthew. Therefore bear fruit worthy of repentance, and do not think to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our father. For I say to you that God is able to raise up children to Abraham from these stones. And even now the axe is laid to the root of the trees. Therefore every tree which does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Bear fruit. Bear good fruit. Blessings aren't meant to be hoarded. They're meant to be shared with others. Your talents, your gifts, your abilities. Jesus says, to he who has more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. If you've been blessed with a talent, a gift, a skill, an ability, that's a blessing. Be a blessing to others. Share that blessing. That's my encouragement to you today. Could be teaching somebody how to shoot. Could be helping somebody with their taxes. It could be any number of things in between. If you are blessed, be a blessing to others. Thank you for listening, and have a blessed day.